Hi everyone, this is my first in what will hopefully be a series of devlogs. I was prompted to do this because many of the different YouTubers and indie game dev content I listened to suggested doing devlogs throughout the process of development. I said sure, why not, I'll give it a shot. I don't really touch video editing that much outside of the few video game montages that you can find on my channel, so it's a little daunting for me to get into regular YouTube video creation in addition to all the other things I want to use my time for. But I'll give it a shot, and if it works, then I'll continue doing it in the future. So a little bit about me. My name is Nick. I'm 26. I currently have a full-time job as an embedded systems developer during the day, where I work on code and infrastructure for physical electronics. Outside of work, I like to play video games a lot. The type of game I currently enjoy usually varies. Most often kind of coincides with what my friends enjoy at the time, but I'm finally getting around to getting into game development for actually a variety of reasons, but the main reason is that I've kind of had this game sitting in my brain as thoughts, and I'm finally in a place to turn that thought into a full project. So I've actually already begun work on my game. It tends to cross some boundaries in terms of genres, but so far I've come to describe it as kind of a 2D, top-down, pseudo-real-time strategy, arcade-style, online competitive game. TM. In this game, working title Wiz Blitz, which I'm sure we'll run through a few more iterations, the player dukes it out with another player as wizards on a Pac-Man style maze arena. In this game, turns usually occur where both players lock in their movement and action at the same time. Actions are usually spells, but may be other things too as the game development progresses. We all know what wizard spell casting looks like. A wizard might cast and sure, they'll have to say the magic words, but they're also going to have to wiggle their fingers a little bit, or clap, or do a little motion. In this game, WizBlitz, the characters controlled by the user will also have to do similar little motions and claps, reflected through minigames. Minigames might be easier or more difficult, depending on the effectiveness and complexity of the spells being cast. Kind of like WarioWare or Among Us, where little minigames pop up in windows. In order to balance the effectiveness of these spells, players will be encouraged to lock in their turn faster than their opponent. When a player is quicker to lock in than their opponent, they will be rewarded via a tug-of-war system. Whoever plays the fastest will continue to gain momentum. This can materialize as additional movement on a turn, or spell augments, or regeneration. It's kind of still up in the air at the moment. So, there you have it. That's the gist of the overall game. A lot of it's still in my head, and as I continue to knock out core mechanical systems and gain the opportunities to put in more tiny bits of expression and uniqueness, that'll become more fleshed out later on. So drum roll please, here is our progress so far. Yeah, it's not much. So far we have a character who can move and who can throw spells, but we don't have any of the cool systems that I was talking about earlier. So today, we're going to be tackling one of those systems, Fog of War. In WizBlitz, Fog of War is being used to add risk to movement and actions that players will perform. The game area is laid out on a tile map with a couple of different layers. There's one for floors and one for walls. If there are floors and not walls, then that means that it's a navigable space, meaning that the player can move on it and Fog of War can also appear on it. When the player or their spells move through navigable spaces, it will cause the Fog of War to dissipate in areas dependent on what kind of entity is navigating. For instance, a magic missile might have a small area that it reveals around it, while the player might be able to see a range of 5 tiles. When the Fog of War is cleared in an area, the player is able to see enemy spells and enemy players beneath the fog. So that's how it should work. Now, let's take a look and see what we've got so far. Well, it's something. So far we have a tile map on top of a tile map that's used for fog. But right now, it doesn't really work dynamically at all. There's no effects from any of the entities within the map that might cause that fog to dissipate. So let's try to put that in today. Currently, our fog is created at the ready step by subdividing each tile into 16 subsections and pasting the translucent fog texture over it. We take each box, judge whether it's a floor or a wall, and paste the fog in. When the game starts, the whole map is covered in fog by default. The next goal is to remove tiles in specific spots surrounding visible entities. the Fog Manager has a list of entities that currently exist on the board. These will include spells, characters, and other effects that will give vision. On a set interval, we want to update the fog so that it clears fog from visible areas and fills fog back into areas that the entities leave. So there's two parts that I can see for making this. Creating the system for making the fog disappear, and then creating the system for making the fog fill back in. We're going to start with disappearing. Each entity should have a diameter property that tells the Fog Manager how the absence of fog should extend around said entity. Because the tile map and map sizing is a complete prototype, I'd really like the diameter property to be a ratio of the movement tile size rather than a hard-coded value. So to make a square's worth of fog centered on the entity disappear, the property would need to be 1.0. To extend the reveal by 0.5 squares in all directions, we would make the diameter 2.0, and so on and so on. For me, adding a property like this kind of screams object-oriented design. I'm still new to GDScript, and so I went on the hunt for a way to inherit fog clearing functionality. In a language I'm more familiar with, like C++, you would create a class, usually, maybe vision entity, and that would have a diameter property, and then every entity that clears fog of war would inherit from the vision entity class. But the wizard class already extends character body 2D, so how do I also make it an entity that clears vision? The approach I came up with was to give every node that needs to clear fog a special vision entity variable inside of it. We then must assume that any entities in the fog entities list have that vision entity variable. Using the knowledge that the vision entity variable exists, we can have the Fog Manager query its known entities for their position, use the vision diameter to calculate which tiles to clear, and then apply the tile changes as necessary. It looks something like this. As you can see, the fog is disappearing relative to the diameter variable we gave the entities. The player clears the full tiles, and the magic missile clears half tile areas according to that variable we set earlier. We can change the density of the fog tile set, and it should keep the area of cleared fog as close to the same as possible. However, it looks like we're going to have to add some changes to make that happen. The core misunderstanding has to do with tile proportions. The base tile map has a rendering quadrant size of 16, and the fog tile map has a rendering quadrant size of 4. This led me to believe that the tile set of the fog should equal the fog tile map, and it works when the size is 4. However, this is actually a mathematical coincidence. The tile set size was 4 because the base rendering quadrant size divided by the fog rendering quadrant size was 4. When you change the fog tile map rendering size to 8, it should not have a tile set size of 8. Instead, the tile set size should actually be 2. 16 divided by 8 is 2. After fixing that, we get a correct result for rendering, though the density of the tile set has increased, so it appears that the fog is much more opaque than it used to be. I'm happy with how the disappearing turned out, so now it's time for reappearing. I'm going to refer to this as fog materializing. The effect we want to achieve is that we want cleared fog to reappear sometime after it's cleared. I play a lot of League of Legends, and some abilities in that game that exemplify this effect are Jinx Ultimate, Ashe Ultimate, and Ezreal Ultimate. My primary idea for achieving this involves measuring the amount of time each fog tile has disappeared and making it rematerialize after a certain amount of time has elapsed. I want to cache each cleared tile and pair it with the time it was cleared, and then at every process step, we're going to check the time since it's been cleared. Because this is a competitive style video game, I don't want the time passed to be tied to the frame count. In other words, using process to increment timers is a bad idea. So we want to keep a millisecond timer running that is checked on every frame for every cleared fog tile. Well, now we have rematerializing fog, but with a problem. The fog is trying to reappear on tiles where the player is currently sitting. This is actually going to be a huge problem for any stationary objects. We want to augment the fog rematerializing function to check whether the square currently intersects with the squares being cleared by an entity. Every time we calculate the fog cleared by an entity, we should save the set of cleared fog tiles if it is different from the last tile saved. Then, if the fog should rematerialize, we should skip trying to rematerialize it only if the fog tile is currently included in the persistent fog cleared list. We should make this part of the internal vision entity class so that we can tie the checks to the lifetime of the entities. Along the way to getting this implementation complete, I had to tackle a few issues that I ran into. Here's a rundown of those problems. So firstly, there is the aforementioned stationary entity issue. The solution was to ensure the persistent tiles were stored and cleared appropriately. Secondly, the tile the player was currently on and sitting on would always repopulate the instant that they moved away from it. This was because duplicate tiles were being added when the player was idle, which means that the first tile with the oldest timestamp was still present. When checking the time to see whether we should repop the tiles, it would find the oldest timestamp first and evaluate the repop condition based on oldest time the fog was dissipated. Lastly, you probably noticed that magic missiles would cause tiles outside of the initial tile grid to be repopulated after the fog timeout. This was caused by a lack of checks for if a tile should have fog, which was an easy fix to add in because we wrote that code earlier. So here's our finished Fog of War feature. With some refactoring, we can bind fog dissipation to each entity so that new elements may be created later on with internal structures for fog properties. We'll build upon this in the future by using the fog to hide non-emitting entities beneath it, such as ones spawned by other players and other players themselves. If we decide to change the fog behavior, it's as simple as editing the fog scene, and that should retain all mechanical work that we put in so far. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be continuing to post more devlogs for the next few endeavors on this project. In the immediate future, I want to tackle the turn-based system, so that'll probably be the next video's topic. If these videos do well, I'll keep doing them for the whole project. Leaving a like on the video is a great way to push me towards that direction. So thanks, I'll see you all next time.